All right, so today we're going to be talking about for QuickBooks Online for retail stores, and we're going to specifically be talking about rent, which is probably going to be one of your biggest expenses right up there with labor, whether you're a brick and mortar store paying for rent, or maybe you're more into e-commerce and you're paying for warehouse rent. So I think it's important to, if you do have rent, to create some sort of automatic bill every month. And I'll explain why later in this video as to why I believe this is so important. But first, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to create these with QuickBooks Online. They're called recurring bills, is what they're called. So we can go ahead and get started. So to start, if you go to this gear icon in the top right, you're going to see the list menu here, and we're going to go down to recurring transactions. There's a lot of different transactions that you can make recurring in QuickBooks Online. And again, for this one, we're going to be making a recurring bill. So we can go ahead and hit OK there. And then, so we're going to be doing this. In this scenario, it's going to be an outdoor store that's got 2 locations. We're going to call them North and South Store. So we're first going to do the North Store rent. So you can make this scheduled or reminder or unscheduled. I would say mostly you'd probably want to do it scheduled for rent. And what that means is that it automatically actually creates the bill for you a monthly, weekly, daily. And this second column right here where it says create blank days in advance, what this means is, so let's say it's due, the rent is due on the 1st of the month. If you make it, let's say, for example, we're going to do it 14 days in advance. What that means is 2 weeks before it's due on the 1st of the month, which would be in the middle of the prior month, is when the bill is actually going to be created. So if you don't have any vendors here, you can quickly just add a vendor by typing and then add new. I set up some vendors already, so we're just going to do first one. Let's say it's Atlas Real Estate for the North Store. You can change the intervals here. So a lot of options here. If you want to do quarterly, you can make it monthly for every 3 months. Weekly, daily, you have a lot of options here. So even when you do monthly here, you also have the option to, so right now it'd be on the first day of the month is what this setting is. Let's say, for example, your landlord maybe is the first weekday of the month or something along those lines. Then you can hit first here and then maybe the first Monday of the month. But I would say for most, let's say it's going to be the first day of the month. And it's the middle of May right now, so let's say that it's going to start beginning of next month. And here's where you can make the end date for this recurring bill. So if it's indefinite, you can just leave this at none. You can do a specific date for like a lease end date, for example. Or you can do after a certain amount of occurrences. So let's say this is a 12-month, 1-year lease, so we're going to make it after 12 occurrences or 12 months. Terms here is when it's due. After it's created, so let's say it's due 15 days after the first. And right here, if you have store, this could be location store. If you're tracking that, this is where you can add that. So we're going to make it the North Store. Category, you probably have some sort of rent chart of account made. If not, you can create it here. And we're going to make this one for $9.50. If you have any classes or anything, this is where you can add it there. One thing I'd like to mention here is that even if it's not an exact amount every month, I'd still think it's a good idea to create this recurring bill. Let's say, for example, that included in your rent is let's say water, for example. So let's say that fluctuates every month by $100 or so. You can make a description, say, remember to check the bill and add water, especially if there's more than one person having their hands in the QuickBooks Online file. You can really quickly and easily come in every month and change this amount and then make a payment on that bill. But you at least know you know that you have rent due on this day and it's going to be around this amount. So I still think it's important, even if this fluctuates, to do this. And that's pretty much the end of that. If you hit Save Template, then that's going to be one of your recurring bills made. I'm going to quickly show you 2 other ways to do it and then go into once these are made where they are and then explain why I believe this is important. So another way that you can do this, let's say, for example, you're creating a lot of your recurring bills all in one sitting. An easy way to do that once you create the first one is if you just hit this down arrow right here in your recurring transactions list, you can actually make a copy or a duplicate. And then once you do that, then you can change if you want to make it south and then change the vendor if you need to. Or another way to do it, if you just go to make a regular bill, there's an option to make it recurring from there. So in order to make a regular bill, if you were to go to this new here, and then under vendors, there's the bill. So we're going to actually, let's say this is the South landlord, and we're going to make the same recurring bill, but for the South store. Let's say it's due net 15. It's going to be June 1st. It's going to be for the South store. You make it the same category. Let's say this one's a fixed amount of, say, $10.50. And then once the bill is created, and you can do this with most transactions in QuickBooks Online, is there's going to be a make recurring option down here in the middle and the bottom. So if you click that, it goes to relatively the same screen as we were just at before. So we can make this one the South landlord. Let's call this South rent. Scheduled 2 weeks in advance on the 1st of the month. We're going to start it again on June 1st. And let's say this one is good until November 1st, the lease. It's going to be net 15. Okay, and you can save it from there. So now we have two recurring bills created. And what's essentially going to happen, so let's say it's the middle of May now, and you have rent due for both these locations on June 1st. So what's going to happen is, because of the settings and everything that we did, 2 weeks before this June 1st date, a bill is going to be created in QuickBooks Online, which is going to increase your accounts payable for the rent payable. And then once this June 1st date hits, it's going to be due, quote unquote due, and it's going to be due within 15 days. And then you can make a payment based off of that bill. And the reason why this is so beneficial versus just because another option you can do is just when you make the rent payment, you can just make a rent expense every time you do it. A big downside to that is, let's say, for example, it's May 2nd and you pay your rent for the month of May. And let's say, for example, it's May 28th and then your landlord sends you the bill for June's rent and you go ahead and make that payment before June. You make it a little early. What that can do is show up on your books as 2 rent payments made in May. And what you really need for reporting purposes is 1 rent payment in May and 1 rent payment in June. And if you have these monthly bills created, then it basically eliminates that, because whenever you make that payment a few days early in May, you're able to make that payment off of the bill that's already been created for June rent. And then everything lines up correctly for management reporting purposes. So, so where do these show up? We created these 2 recurring bills for rent. Now where are they? So one place to look at these is if you, again, go into the gear icon and then the recurring transactions list here. You'll see our recurring transactions, including those 2 monthly transactions. Now where they show up in the books month to month, one place where you can see them is if you go to reports right here, and then you can search for unpaid bills. And if this is a report that you look at a lot, which you should be, and especially it can be a really powerful report if you set up those recurring bills. And you can bookmark this report, you can customize it, you can favorite it. And then once that 2 weeks prior to the end of the month, it's going to show up as unpaid bills for the following month of rent payable. Another place where it can show up is in your expenses. You can go to vendors, and you're going to have this bar here. And again, once those bills are being created, they're going to be showing up here, so they can be open, overdue, due, and it can show up here for those recurring bills.